Welcome to G5 Classified, your one-stop shop for all things Group of 5 college football. Stepping up to the microphone are your hosts, Gabe Kuhn and Kyron Samuels. Now, let's talk some G5 football.
All right, welcome back to another episode of G5 Classified. We have a return guest this time, the first return guest in the history of G5 Classified podcast, Associate Commissioner Tre Stallings of the Conference USA. How you doing, man?
Man, doing good, man. Glad to be here in Jacksonville, Alabama. Looking forward to our football championship game played on tomorrow night in Jacksonville State. So looking forward to our conversation today.
Yeah, man, I told you if we made it to the conference championship game and we hosted it, we'll bring you back on. So I'm happy to be having this conversation because we thought that the trajectory looked like we get here, but you never know. You still got to play the game, still got to handle business. So we're just going to get right into it, man. What are your thoughts about the game itself? We have two 8-4 teams, Jacksonville State versus West Kentucky, two teams that are going upwards. They're trending upwards and looking like they're going to be very competitive in this game. We just saw them play last week, which is another wrinkle thrown in. What are your preliminary thoughts on the game itself?
Well, I'm looking forward to a really physical game. You know, if there's any indication from what this game will be, all we have to do, again, to your point, is look back to what happened last week. And you talk about a physical game, really, in my opinion, dominated defensively on both sides of the ball. Offenses really struggled to really move the ball consistently, that is. And so what I'm looking for is really what is the trench play actually going to show up and how it's going to show up in this game. That's really what I'm looking forward to, really seeing, again, who's going to be able to play through the elements because we're expecting a cold weather game and really see who's going to come out on top.
Yeah, it was interesting. I was in the presser a couple of days ago, and we're talking to Rich Rod about it, and he kind of said it presents a unique challenge, right? It was a little bit different. He wasn't really used to it, and then you had Coach Helton, who was like, "I love it. It's pretty much like the continuation of the last game." He said we're pretty much at halftime. We played the first half at our field, and now we're going to go to their field and play the second half. So it was interesting to see the dynamic, how they talked about it. But I'm excited to watch the game for sure. Another thing I want to talk to you about: both of these teams are in a really good position, right? At 8-4. Have you heard anything about bowl placement for these teams? I know that this might be above my pay grade right now, but I'm interested because we're starting to hear some of these bowl announcements. Do you have any intel on that?
Yeah, right now we really don't have any indication, right, of where these two particular teams will be playing at, mainly because of they're in the championship game, so they'll kind of have, I would say, a special placement based on those predicaments. We'll see, obviously, where the chips may fall in terms of where they play at. But I do think it'll be a really nice location. I do think they'll be pleased with the opponents that they'll be lined up against. And really, really we'll have the opportunity to show what Conference USA football is all about.
Awesome. Well, you speak of Conference USA football, and my next subject is something I really wanted to get into because it's playoff expansion, right? What are your thoughts on the 12-team playoff as a whole before we get into the next crop of the questions, which is, do you feel like G5 teams are getting fairly treated when we look at the top 25 of the rankings and the potential to join that 12-team playoff?
Yeah, I like the expansion. Obviously, it adds a lot of intrigue just to the season itself. So many different talking points that you can obviously pull from. And really, to me, it stresses the importance of scheduling, right? Especially for the group of 5 schools. And I think as our ADs kind of look at the landscape now, and obviously they see the Boise States of the world, they see the Armies of the world, the Tulanes, the Memphises. I think it puts us in a situation where we have to be strategic with how we move forward with our scheduling. Because if you look at the group of 5, like think about Northern Illinois, right? Who was ranked AP poll once they beat Notre Dame, like extremely high. But then when you take it to the totality of the season, it's almost like cannibalism, right? You get into conference play and you're kind of beating up on each other. There's not a real advantage in terms of preparation from week to week because the opponent who you're playing against. You have so many opportunities to watch them from a film perspective to really be able to attack teams in certain situations. So for me, I think again, we just need to look at how we can strategically come up with a plan to put our best teams in the best position to make sure that we are being talked about at the end of the season. It's one thing, again, to be talked about, in September and October, but who is actually bringing noise in November? And I think that's where we need to get to a point, much like Liberty did last year. How can we get our teams to a point to where they're being mentioned, at the end of November, like Boise State is now?
It's funny, you just answered my next two questions, which was thoughts about administration campaigning and non-conference scheduling, which is probably going to be a huge thing for G5s going forward. So you answered those two questions. Now I don't even have to ask those. So now I'm just going to, get into the last crop of questions we have. Is there any talks of potential expansion again? I know we talked about it a couple months ago, but college landscape changes extremely fast, especially in this day and age. Is there any more talks about potential expansion? And are you satisfied with the strength of the conference right now?
I think right now I think our presidents are really firmly embedded into the 11 teams that we'll have moving forward, right? Because UTEP obviously will leave after next year, and at this point, I don't think that there is a pulse to really go out and just grab another team just to get us to 12. I think I think what we need to do is look back at what the American did. We know when they lost a couple teams, they stayed at 11. I thought it was a good fit for them and what they were trying to do moving forward. And I think the same thing for us. I think if someone presents a really good argument for us to add, I think our presidents will take a look at that and really put us in a position where it's an advantage and not a disadvantage with us adding the school.
Awesome. So I only got a couple more. We'll get you out of here, man. Can we get a prediction out of you for the game? I know you probably got to feel like Switzerland right now and be a little bit neutral, but do we have a prediction for the game?
I better not. I have in my mind of how the game is going to play out, but if I give a prediction, boy, I'll be in a world of trouble. So I'll definitely stray away from that one.
All right, I'll get you up out of here, man. Appreciate you for joining. I'll run it to you soon here. Thank you for joining G5 Classified again. Associate Commissioner of the Conference USA, Tre Stallings, man. Thank you for your time.
Thanks, Kyron. Appreciate you, man.
Yes, sir.
Thank you for listening to this episode of G5 Classified. If you enjoyed this episode, leave a rating and a review wherever you download your podcasts. To watch this episode, head over to the Bluff City Media YouTube channel. We'll see you back here next week.